North Korea's most famous football star hasn't been seen in 3 years, and Kwang-Song made his last public appearance in August of 2020, winning the Qatar Stars League trophy for Al Duhail. Since then, his whereabouts have been unknown.
Pyongyang-born striker Han Kwang-Song impressed teammates and coaches, rising to the heady heights of Italian giant Juventus, aged just 21. Then he vanished, his whereabouts still unknown.
He's losing the best years of his career.
The talent of Han Kwang-Song was so special, it allowed him to escape North Korea and move to Italy for a football career that brought him to one of Europe's elite teams, Juventus. Nicknamed the North Korean Ronaldo, Han Kwang-Song was on a path to potential stardom with the chance to earn millions playing in front of the world. But even though Han had left North Korea to pursue his football dreams, the influence of his country still loomed large over his life, with Han forbidden from giving interviews, being assigned a handler who followed him everywhere, and reportedly being forced to send his wages back to the Kim Jong-un regime until eventually North Korea's influence killed Han's promising career tragically early. Currently just 24 years old, the North Korean Ronaldo hasn't played a competitive game of football for 3 years, and with his football career effectively dead, there are serious concerns around his whereabouts and well-being, as he hasn't been seen in public for over 2 years. This video tells the true story of the sad downfall of North Korea's biggest ever football talent, and how a player who seemed destined for greatness is now just known as yet another victim of the North Korean regime, who has completely disappeared from the public eye through no fault of his own. Let's get into the video. Football is known as the world's sport, and there isn't a single corner of the globe that the sport has failed to penetrate, and that includes the deeply secretive and restrictive North Korea, in which football is by far the most popular sport. Despite the many obstacles in its way, North Korean football has a long and interesting history, which includes what many consider to be the biggest upset in World Cup history. In 1966, at the World Cup held in England, the unfancied underdog North Korean side squared off against footballing giants Italy, needing an improbable win to advance from the group stages to the knockout round. Cheered on by a crowd in Middlesbrough that had adopted the North Koreans as their own, North Korea overcame astonishing odds and shocked the entire world with a stunning 1-0 upset over the Italians to dump them out of the World Cup and become the first Asian team to ever progress from the World Cup group stage. In the knockout round, North Korea squared up against Portugal, but despite taking a 3-0 lead, they were unfortunately beaten 5-3, with the legendary striker Eusebio bagging 4 goals, sending the North Korean team home as history makers and national heroes for their efforts. The next time we would see the North Koreans at the World Cup was 44 years later in 2010, when they qualified for the World Cup held in South Africa. Unfortunately, there was no heroics this time, and North Korea were dumped out of the competition after losing all 3 of their matches. The main memory most people have of North Korea's 2010 World Cup were the rumours that North Korean state media was claiming North Korea had won the World Cup and was showing its citizens edited videos of supposed North Korean goals to prove it, but this has subsequently been debunked as untrue. The unsuccessful 2010 team was also publicly berated by government figures for 6 hours upon their return home from the tournament. While North Korea may not boast the most successful history in football, it does have one major asset, in that Kim Jong-un, the nation's dictator, is reportedly a huge fan of the sport. And it was Kim Jong-un's passion for football that helped give birth to the career of a young Pyongyang-born boy named Han Kwang-Song, who earned a place to study at the prestigious Pyongyang International Football School, which was set up in 2013 by Kim Jong-un with the intention to produce international quality football players. Such was Kim Jong-un's passion for football that the kids studying at his international football school were sent on funded trips abroad to train at prestigious academies across the world, with Han Kwang-Song and teammates spending time training in Spain before they went and competed in the 2014 Asian Football Under-16s Championship. This well-drilled and well-trained North Korean Under-16s team went on to win the championship, beating arch-rival South Korea in the final, with emerging star Han Kwang-Song bagging a goal. Thanks to both natural talent and high-level foreign coaching, Han was quickly emerging as the brightest prospect of what was a very talented crop of North Korean youngsters. Han was not particularly tall, but he had blistering pace, an exceptional work rate, lethal heading, and had the technique to back it up as a striker capable of using both feet. After helping his nation win the Under-16 Asian tournament, Han's talent was spotted by scouts from outside of North Korea, and Han, along with some teammates, was offered the extraordinary opportunity of a full scholarship in Perugia, Italy, with the ISM Academy, to develop his skills further with a view to launching a career in Europe. With the North Korean government's blessing, the teenager packed his bags and moved to Italy to experience parts of the world that 99.99% of his North Korean compatriots will never get to see. Due to FIFA regulations regarding signing underage players, Han was not allowed to register with an Italian club until he was 18, and spent his time studying, learning Italian, and training with ISM Academy coaches as he tried to adapt to the unfamiliar surroundings and freedom in Italy. Han spent 1 year training at the ISM Academy until he finally turned 18 and became eligible to sign a professional football contract. The talent of Han Kwang-Song was so high that numerous elite-level clubs were circling around the young North Korean, with Liverpool's chief scout allegedly flying to Perugia to meet Han Kwang-Song and persuade him to join Liverpool. This persuasion included offering Han the chance to meet Liverpool legend Steven Gerrard, but this offer fell completely flat when they realized that Han had never even heard of Steven Gerrard due to his sheltered upbringing in North Korea. Manchester City were another club who tried to convince Han to join them, but instead, Han opted to accept an 8-week trial offer from Italian side Cagliari on the advice of ISM's Academy sports director, with the trial resulting in Han being offered a professional contract with the club. Cagliari's players were so impressed by the young and humble North Korean that one of the players said that if the club didn't sign Han, then he'd sign him himself, because it was obvious that he was going right to the top of the game. But unfortunately, while the hard-working Han Kwang-Song just wanted to start his career, his nationality would continually throw up hurdles in front of him. After signing his professional contract, there was widespread concern in Italy that any money earned by North Korean footballers would be forcefully repatriated back to North Korea, violating the worldwide embargo on the country. This debate raged on to the extent an Italian parliamentary investigation was carried out, with the result being that Han Kwang-Song's career could continue, but his club was to make absolute sure that Han was the one receiving the money and it was not being sent back home. With this obstacle out of the way, Han could focus on football, and he hit the ground running with a hat-trick for Cagliari under-19s on his very first day at the club, leading to an immediate promotion to the first team, who played in Italy's top league, Serie A. Within 2 months of joining Cagliari, Han made history by becoming the first ever North Korean player to make a Serie A appearance. And he then bettered that the next week by becoming the first North Korean player to ever score in Serie A, with a goal against Torino, aged just 18 years old. This form and his obvious huge potential earned him a contract renewal and a pay rise, as the footballing world was quickly waking up to the immense talent of Han Kwang-Song. His unique background, likable character, and talent made him an extremely interesting story, not just in Italy, but around the football world, with many people keeping an eye on the North Korean prodigy. Keen for Han to get more match experience and develop his tactical understanding of the game, Cagliari sent Han on a 6-month loan to Perugia in August 2017, the same city where he'd studied at the ISM Academy. He started quickly, scoring 7 goals in 17 games for Perugia, before returning to his parent club Cagliari in February to finish out the season, earning his first Serie A start along the way. For the 2018-19 season, Han was again loaned to Perugia in Serie B, but struggled with injuries and didn't play as frequently as he might have liked. But this didn't stop people from taking notice of the talent of the young striker, and as the 2019-20 season kicked off, Han Kwang-Song managed to secure a sensational move to European giants Juventus, by far the most dominant team in Italy at the time, and highlighting the level of talent that scouts could see in Han Kwang-Song. Typical for Italian football, and especially Juventus, the structure of his transfer was a bit weird, with it being an initial 2-year loan followed by an obligation to buy Han, meaning he was technically still owned by Cagliari for 2 more years, but for all intents and purposes belonged to Juventus as they were obligated to purchase him. It was just typical accounting shenanigans from Juve. This transfer to Juventus made Han Kwang-Song a major success story for North Korea's footballing excellence attempts. and Han would now have the opportunity to represent North Korean football at the highest level of the game if he could break through at Juventus. And it was a remarkable rise for the humble and unassuming kid from Pyongyang who'd thrown himself into life in Italy, learnt fluent Italian, bonded with teammates, and worked as hard as he could to make his dreams come true despite the many obstacles he'd faced in his life. But within the space of just 6 months, Han Kwang-Song's dreams would be in complete tatters and through no fault of his own, with his only crime being his North Korean passport and the issues that brings. While people only had great things to say about Han Kwang-Song as a person, there were some oddities that came with him that weren't necessarily his fault, but rather a byproduct of being born in the oppressive North Korean state. Such was the influence of the state over Han Kwang-Song that he was expressly forbidden by the North Korean government from giving any interviews to media, who were naturally interested in the story of a player rising to the top from a very unlikely origin. A great example of this restriction came during his loan spell at Perugia. After scoring 5 goals in 6 appearances in Italy's second division, Han had been scheduled to appear on an Italian TV station for an interview, but the interview had to be abruptly cancelled just hours before it was due to start, when the North Korean government contacted Kwang-Song and ordered him not to do the interview, or he would face being sent back to North Korea. This reportedly made the young striker burst into tears, and sums up the fact that even though he'd left North Korea, they very much still wielded immense power over him and, more importantly, his future. If you look online for interviews from Han Kwang-Song, you'll find very little. There is one interview he did for Cagliari's YouTube channel in fluent Italian, which you would assume North Korea had okayed, and a couple of quotes from Han Kwang-Song, such as one on the website of the ISM Academy that gave him his start in Italy, in which he describes playing for Juventus as a dream. But other than that, there really isn't anything else from one of the most unique stories to hit Italian football in years. Another example of Han Kwang-Song's fear of his home country came from conversations with teammates during his time in Italy. While all of his teammates liked Han and found him to be a very good guy, they could never, ever get him to divulge any details of what his life in North Korea had been like, with Han quick to change subjects and giving non-answers to questions, probably fearing if he said anything negative and it got out in the media, he'd be forced back to North Korea and his career would be over.
Pennington says Han was well liked and fit in easily, but was always accompanied by an Italian man he called security. More likely he was his minder, a common way Pyongyang monitors its own when overseas. Anytime Pennington asked about North Korea, he says the conversation ended abruptly.
And given that his family all lived in North Korea, who has shown plenty of times that it is not above threatening families, it's not surprising that Han Kwang-Song was scared to do anything that might offend them. But unfortunately for Han Kwang-Song, despite abiding by the wishes of North Korea as best as he could, they would still ultimately be the reason for the rapid end to his football career. As soon as Han Kwang-Song signed for Juve, there was controversy surrounding whether the bulk of his wages would be sent home to North Korea. With North Korea under heavy sanctions thanks to its nuclear ambitions, there was concerns that Han Kwang-Song would be forced into sending his salary back home, which could then inadvertently be used to help fund the North Korean nuclear program. And these concerns over money being sent to North Korea were not without merit, as one of the other North Koreans who had moved to Italy with Han had had his contract with Fiorentina terminated after suspicions that most of his wages were making their way back home. Han got his head down and tried to focus on his career at Juventus, appearing regularly for Juventus under-23s team and even being named in a matchday squad for Juventus's first team. But Juventus were quickly realizing that they had a ticking time bomb on their hands, as sanctions against North Korea and its citizens ramped up, with an order from the United Nations that all North Korean nationals had to be deported back to North Korea to avoid wages earned in foreign nations being sent home to fund their nuclear missile ambitions. This meant there was no possible way for Han Kwang-Song's career at Juventus to continue, and they had to get rid of him just 6 months after signing him. Despite the fact that the United Nations had made it clear that North Koreans needed to be deported home, in January 2020, Juventus triggered its buy clause on Han Kwang-Song from Cagliari, and 5 days later was somehow able to sell him to Al Duhail in Qatar, making a profit of 3.5 million euros in the process. Why Al Duhail did this deal is uncertain, but it meant that just 6 months after making a dream move to Juventus, his dreams were over, and he was moving to a team playing at a much, much lower level than Juventus, through no real fault of his own. It is hard to imagine the heartbreak of seeing all of your hard work go up in smoke in the space of just 6 months, with nothing you can do about it. To reiterate, there was no evidence that Han Kwang-Song had sent any money back to the North Korean government, but that did not matter, and his time at the elite level was over before it ever really began. Han's contract in Qatar was a sizable one, with a salary of over 4 million euros a year, completely tax-free, but he doesn't really strike me as the kind of guy who's motivated by money. And if he was, then why did he sign for Cagliari instead of taking a big money offer from the likes of Liverpool or Manchester City? It was a rapid and sad downfall for Han, relegated to plying his trade in a league nobody outside of Qatar watches, but it would get even worse from here. Yet again, Han got his head down and tried to focus on football, playing regularly for Al Duhail and even netting the first and only senior trophy of his career by helping his team win the Qatar Stars League. But even Qatar couldn't shield Han from the power of the United Nations sanctions, and in August 2020, just half a year after Al Duhail paid 7 million euros to sign Han, they were forced to release him from his contract, after the UN claimed signing him to be a direct violation of the sanctions. Upon joining Al Duhail, Han had signed a bank pledge vowing none of his salary would find its way to North Korea. But ultimately, this changed nothing, as the sanctions were still in effect and Qatar had an obligation to deport Han Kwang-Song back to North Korea as soon as they could. Literally in the space of 1 calendar year, Han went from signing for Juventus and being on top of the world to getting his contract in the Mickey Mouse Qatari League cancelled and being forcibly deported back to North Korea with no evidence that he had ever done anything wrong other than possess a North Korean passport. A tragic downfall. Han Kwang-Song's contract had been terminated in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, which caused problems for Qatar's plans to deport him, as North Korea completely closed its borders with 0 exceptions, making it impossible for Han to be deported back to North Korea. Qatar put him on a flight back to Italy, and from there, the man once touted as North Korea's Ronaldo completely disappeared, not just from football, but from public life in general, with no confirmed sightings or updates on him, despite the fact that it is highly unlikely that he could have gone home to North Korea due to their COVID lockdowns. The only rumor regarding his whereabouts suggests he's been living at a North Korean embassy in Italy, while they await an opportunity to deport him home. Given that North Korea is still sanctioned, there is no way for Han Kwang-Song to play football, and he hasn't played a competitive match in over 3 years now. A devastating blow to his development, and it now seems certain that he will never get the chance to fulfill the potential that had scouts all over Europe drooling. With recent news reports suggesting North Korea is finally in the process of reopening to the world, Han Kwang-Song may already be back home, and if he isn't, then it seems likely that he will be deported in short order once the borders are fully reopened. Once he is back home, he will have the opportunity to finally resume his career, but in the unheralded, low-standard and secretive North Korean National League, which is completely dominated by April 25, the military's football team. But at least it will free him from the limbo his life has been in since 2020, where he's been forced to sit and wait for a chance to go home. We may also see Han return for the North Korean national side if they resume playing internationals after completely stopping during their period of lockdown. But it seems impossible that we will ever get to see Han Kwang-Song compete at the highest level of the game again. I truly hope something significant changes in his favour and allows him to resume his career as soon as possible, but that is extremely doubtful at this stage. Having played no competitive games in 3 years and completely disappearing from the public eye, Han Kwang-Song will unfortunately go down as the biggest what if in North Korean football history. The end. If you enjoyed this video, then check out my video on the football star who attempted to become an international drug lord. Alternatively, check out the playlist on the channel for videos and stories from other sports. Please consider dropping a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribing for more interesting sports stories just like this one. Peace.